Officials took a major step forward in the investigation of that midair collision between an American Airlines passenger jet and an Army Black Hawk helicopter near Washington, D.C. Wednesday night. And as you can see here, the National Transportation Safety Board confirms 2 black boxes from the American Airlines aircraft have been recovered. Those black boxes will now be analyzed by the NTSB lab about a mile away from the crash site. And here's what else we know this morning as officials race to find answers on how this crash happened in the first place. CBS News analysis of publicly available flight data found the Black Hawk helicopter may have been flying above the permitted altitude. That data showed the helicopter reached about 400 feet when it crashed, just above the crucial 200-foot ceiling. Now, back on the ground, operations resumed today after those efforts were paused due to dangerous conditions. The D.C. fire chief says floating ice and wind made operations very difficult. Right now, temperatures in the Potomac River are about 35 degrees. Now, those crews are also looking to resume recovering bodies from the water. At least 40 bodies have been recovered so far, and officials believe there were no survivors. And we're also learning more today about some of the victims on board that plane. 6 members of the Boston Figure Skating Club were killed in that crash. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy met with some of the families that lost their loved ones in this tragedy. In a social media post late last night, Duffy said, quote, "Their pain is immeasurable. I can't take away their pain, but I can do a very small part to help ease it by keeping my promise to get to the bottom of what happened and to be 100% transparent about the results of the investigation. They have my word." Duffy is scheduled to visit the FAA Command Center later on today to continue this investigation. CBS News correspondent Skyler Henry joins us now from Reagan National Airport for more on all of this. Skyler, thank you for being with us. What information can investigators learn from those black boxes that were recovered from the American Airlines flight?
Yeah, Liz, good to be with you as always. They can receive the cockpit voice recorder, which will include conversations between pilots, also including conversations between those pilots and air traffic control. And that also includes any unusual sounds, whether that emergency or anything happening in the cockpit itself, so that it will help potential investigators try to navigate exactly what could have been behind that collision that we saw on Wednesday night. Now, we also have learned that those black boxes could also include that flight data recorder, and that will show everything from altitude, airspeed, headings, and it will also include engine performance, control inputs, flaps and landing gear positions, really necessary details and data that will help the NTSB reconstruct exactly what happened at the time of this collision and really sort of try to figure out what caused this problem in the first place. They will also be looking to try to match that information with what they are able to recover from the military aircraft. We know that the Department of Defense, as well as other aspects of the military, are working to help with the FAA and help the NTSB really put all of this together. They say that this will be a meticulous, steady, and thorough investigation made up of several working groups and parts, a systems group, a human performance group that will actually review what the pilots were doing, what they were saying, what air traffic control was doing and saying. They also have a helicopter group component to this as well, determining what that chopper was doing at the time of the collision, whether they had any mechanical issues on board of the aircraft, or whether there was any sort of issue between the communications between the aircraft and air traffic control.
Yeah, speaking of that communications, Skyler, we have some more details about what might have happened inside Reagan National Airport, specifically at the air traffic control tower. We want to play back the sound of that conversation between Flight 5342 and air traffic control, the tower, before the crash. Let's take a listen. We'll talk to you on the other side.
5342 on Mount Vernon, visual runway 1.
Blue Chief 5342, Washington Tower, 1 star, 320 cross 25, you check runway 33. Blue Chief 5178, left turn is Sierra, ground 17.
Let's Sierra, ground 17, 51. Yeah, we can do 33 for Blue Chief 5342.
Blue Chief 5342, at the Wilson Bridge, change to curve runway 33, clear to land.
Change to runway 33 for land, Blue Chief 5342.
Now, Skyler, CBS News has learned the same air traffic control worker managing helicopter traffic was also handling some planes taking off and landing around the same time of the collision. Can you walk us through some of the confusion here around how those seats inside the tower are managed?
Well, typically, what we would see inside an air traffic control tower is one controller dealing with helicopters and another dealing with planes. And given the amount of activity happening here at the airport and the time of day, they say that it was really more accustomed to seeing two people inside of air traffic control as opposed to the one, but they also want to stress that this is not something that is rare. Air traffic control towers usually aren't staffed, given the recent circumstances surrounding funding and all sorts of other issues, at 100% all of the time. And so they say that this is something that isn't necessarily an anomaly, but it is less than usual. We did get some sound from the air traffic control union president earlier today on CBS Mornings. Take a listen to this.
We have a controller shortage in this nation. 10,800 certified controllers are out there doing this job day in, day out, where there should be 14,335. Now, the specifics to this situation itself, since it's under investigation, I can't speak directly to that, but it is not uncommon for us to routinely combine positions, decombine positions. There is usually someone in a supervisory position looking at the overall workload and complexity in order to make those determinations of what positions we need open and when we need them open.
So, as I was pointing out, not uncommon, certainly less than ideal if in a perfect world, but something that these air traffic controllers have to deal with on a daily basis given the financial and staffing shortages throughout the country, not just here at Reagan National Airport. But that's also something that the NTSB says that they will be listening and looking for as part of their preliminary investigation as well. You know, these are the times where you can, sort of play that Monday morning quarterback role to see what could we have done better, how could we have improved this situation so that something like this doesn't happen again, obviously, but also look to make sure everything was being followed as it relates to protocol and command.
Yeah, there could be another issue at play here as well, Skyler. Reagan National Airport is one of 3 in the country considered to be capacity constrained. It's designed to service 15 million passengers a year, but right now it processes more than 26 million. Are investigators looking into if that played a role in this crash, just the congestion in the sky?
Well, one of the things about this airport is that it is known for its congestion because of the amount of aircraft that come in and out of here for different reasons. That's everything from commercial flights to military flights to private flights. All of these things are sort of happening in sort of this orchestra, so to speak. And for the last, decades, this has not been an issue. It is not unusual to see military aircraft flying above not only Reagan National Airport, but in many places at low altitudes surrounding the Washington, D.C. metro area on either training missions or actual missions themselves, escorting VIPs, moving throughout military bases in and around this area as well. And so because it is so routine, I think many people have grown accustomed to seeing those types of things in and around this airport. Again, that will be a part of the review process as well. We know that that is a subject that is actually being taken up by lawmakers on Capitol Hill to see if there are some adjustments that can be altered in that capacity as well, because this is a congested airspace and because this is an anomaly, so to speak, because it is essentially in the heart of government and so many things need to happen here. That is why we heard from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth yesterday, who said that the reason that this training mission was happening in the first place was because there will be times that important VIPs have to come in and out of this area, and the reality is that it will also be happening at times of commercial air travel as well, and so that is why this training was happening in the first place.
Skyler Henry, thank you so much for that. Now, 3 Army soldiers were also on board that Black Hawk helicopter when it collided with the plane, and we're starting to learn more about one of them. Crew Chief Ryan O'Hara leaves behind a wife and a 1-year-old son. The Army said he, along with the pilot and co-pilot of that chopper, were very experienced. Moments ago, CBS News got an exclusive interview with O'Hara's father. Take a listen to how he says he got the tragic news about his son.
it's really like your worst nightmare as a parent of somebody in the military, seeing 2 Army officers at my front door. It's heartbreaking to basically witness your son's death in the news. It's devastating. So I don't know, I keep wondering if my wife and I, and Taryn, will ever feel like we're going to be whole again, because we're just broken. You're just broken.
Heartbreaking to hear that from that father. We'll have much more on that exclusive interview on tonight's CBS Evening News. For now, let's turn to CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata. Charlie, thank you for being with us today. That father, clearly very emotional, any parent's worst nightmare. What more do we know about his son, Ryan O'Hara?
Well, I mean, we look forward to that interview that Mark conducted. To be frank, we don't have a lot of information out of this building, and the reason why is because the crew members of that Black Hawk helicopter have yet to be identified here. They haven't officially made the announcement. So although it's been on social media, obviously Mark spoke to his dad, it's difficult for us to sort of delve into the service history or to get anything on him yet, because the names of the people on that helicopter have not been released yet. We expect that this afternoon. But as you said, he's been described as very experienced along with the rest of the crew. He would have flown this route and this exercise multiple times. He was the crew chief on that Black Hawk. We believe he's been serving for just under 10 years.
And Charlie, we're also learning more details about the actual path of this Black Hawk helicopter. And there's been some speculation, including from the president, that the helicopter was flying higher than it was supposed to, not at the right altitude. Is the military saying anything about that?
Right. So, first of all, we did put that to Army officials, who urge caution and patience until the investigation reveals more. However, data that we've seen from open sources, references like Flight Radar and FlightAware, shows that the Black Hawk's estimated altitude was around 400 feet before the collision, which doesn't sound high, but that's far above the 200-foot ceiling allowed for military helicopter flights anywhere near that airport, and that we have officially at 200-foot ceiling. And earlier today, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said, and I'm quoting here, they're looking at altitude, and the president was clear about that. Someone was at the wrong altitude. Was the Black Hawk too high? Was it on course? Right now, we don't quite know. So that is going to be one of the key questions here. It's all part of the investigation. I've also spoken to people, helicopter pilots, who said that doesn't necessarily mean they were that far off course. It's much, much higher. It's not just over 200. It's 400. But sometimes that's part of the exercise. So it's not necessarily, I was going to say, it's not as reckless as it sounds. What I mean is it's not as extreme as it may sound.
And this was interesting, Charlie. The Secretary of the Army nominee, Daniel Driscoll, said yesterday that, quote, it's an accident that seems to be preventable from what we can tell, unquote. And they may need to, he goes on to say, they may need to look at the appropriate time to do these types of missions. And he also said it may not be at a busy airport like Reagan National. Are you hearing anything from the military today about potentially changing the strategy when it comes to these types of training missions, moving them to a different location?
Right. The short answer on that is no, partly because there's been a pause on any of those missions as of about 24 hours ago. It was a 48-hour pause on these helicopter missions. That might be extended. We also understand, the FAA gets a vote on this too, and they could ban those flights. But as far as the military is concerned, there hasn't been a stop on it, at least yet. I'm sure they're reviewing that. But it has been drilled into me that this is a routine exercise. These are routine assessments. And if you live here, like I've just moved here, you see helicopters along the Potomac and around Reagan National Airport all the time, day and night. It's always shocked me, the prevalence of the helicopters around here, obviously around the Pentagon itself. So that is routine. It's been going on. I spoke to a Black Hawk helicopter pilot yesterday. That's been going on essentially since 9/11. He was flying in 2002, 2003, doing these same exact exercises. He thought he was on that same exact helicopter. So none of this is new. And the increase in frequency, none of that is new. These are standard, routine flights that have been going on for years.
CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata, thank you so much for that insight, sir. President Trump, meanwhile, doubling down on his criticism of DEI policies and the FAA, signing 2 executive orders. The first, appointing Chris Rocheleau, the deputy administrator of the FAA. The second, undoing the damage, the White House says, has been done to aviation safety by the Biden administration's, quote, DEI and woke policies. That's a quote. Now, when asked if he was aware of any performance issues or disciplinary actions taken against those working during the midair collision, he said this. Take a listen.
You said that incompetence may have played a role. Are you aware of any performance issues or disciplinary actions that were taken against anyone who was working the tower last night or flying the plane?
No, and I hope that's not the case in this case, but certainly over the years it's been the case. And it's the case with respect to close calls, and it's the case with respect to circling for hours on end. You know, planes circle a lot, and they circle because the people bringing them down, these people that have to be very, very smart, and it's not based on anything other than the brain. We need the smartest people. We need both psychologically smart and just brilliant, period. And we are going to have them in our control towers. We are going to have the most competent people in the country in our control towers.
All right, with that, let's go live to Washington, D.C. and our CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Ed, great to see you. Our CBS News team confirmed that took the time to get the facts, and they found that it's been a long-standing FAA policy, including before, during, and after President Trump's first term, to include people with disabilities in recruitment like the ones the president just mentioned during his sharp rebuke yesterday. What more can you tell us about these particular policies?
Right. So remember, he has signed, Elizabeth, a series of orders in the last few days since returning to office that in essence undo Biden-era policies, including any diversity, equity, inclusion programs established at federal agencies and departments. The ones that he cited in his press briefing that happened about 24 hours ago is an FAA policy that was on the agency's website since at least 2013, including throughout his first term. It was designed to ensure the FAA was recruiting people for a variety of roles who might have disabilities. Another program that was established during the Trump administration, during the first Trump administration, aimed to help people with disabilities prepare for careers in air traffic operations. But turns out the FAA hired just one person out of that program by the end of 2021, one potential air traffic controller trainee. Not even clear that that person would be qualified to be working in an air traffic control tower like the one at Reagan by now, if they're still in the FAA system. Throughout his campaign, remember, he campaigned on the idea that these kinds of DEI programs were leading agencies and departments to take their eye off the ball, and they were not necessarily doing their actual missions, but focused too much on these kinds of workplace culture and hiring quota programs. He's trying to undo them, and as we saw yesterday, immediately tried to suggest that this had something to do with what has been a decades-long issue with technology, with recruitment, with training, and with increased air traffic and demand, and a dwindling, if not small, number of air traffic control professionals who know how to safely get those planes in and out of the skies.
Now, Ed, can you walk us through, though, those 2 executive orders you mentioned the president signed yesterday? What are they going to do? We know one is going to appoint the FAA administrator, and the second deals with those DEI policies. So what do those executive orders specifically say?
Okay, so the first one makes this guy named Chris Rocheleau the acting administrator. So he's going to have to go through a Senate confirmation hearing at some point. This is somebody with more than 20 years of experience at the FAA, had just been appointed the temporary or the acting deputy administrator last week. Now he's the guy in charge of the place, and obviously has the president's attention given what happened over the skies of the Potomac River on Wednesday night. It speaks, though, however, to the fact that there have been a series of administrators at FAA over the last several years, because this is a budget-crunched, resource-strapped place, and the air traffic community, the aviation community generally, has been warning Congress and the White House and Transportation Department for years. You don't have enough qualified people to run these towers. You're going to have problems like the ones that ensued on Wednesday night. We'll see if Rocheleau is able to fix that. The other one essentially doubled up on the executive orders that he'd signed last week, Elizabeth, and just said that we've got to review all hiring decisions and changes to safety protocols made during the prior 4 years and to take such corrective action as necessary to achieve uncompromised aviation safety, including, interestingly, it says here, including the replacement of any individuals who do not meet qualification standards. This review shall include a systematic assessment of any deterioration in hiring standards and aviation safety standards and protocols during the Biden administration. So once again, it's in essence an accusation in search of proof to some extent, because he's alleging that these programs that have only been put in the last few years may have contributed to this, when if you talk to the aviation safety experts, the air traffic controllers, the union heads that we've had on our air over the last 48 hours will tell you to be an air traffic controller in a tower like the one at Reagan takes multiple years of training, of certification, and it's very unlikely that anyone that would have been hired in the last 4 years would have been working alone, manning helicopters and aircraft over a commercial airport like Reagan on Wednesday night. All of it to come out, of course, in the coming weeks, months, and years as the investigation continues.
Yeah, and the investigation is continuing. We still don't know exactly what caused this horrible crash on Wednesday. A lot of this is still a lot of allegations, a lot of speculations. We still don't know what the true cause was. All right, CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Thanks so much, Ed.